and you represent it.
That's crazy.
It is not about the amount of money that's involved.
Oh, good.
Well, sorry, it is. It's about the amount of money. It has nothing to do with how complicated the legal issue is. Now, you have to be competent to handle the legal issue, but this is the other thing where people don't realize about small claims court. That's just little stuff. It's a small amount. It could be the most complicated legal issue that has ever existed. But it's over $20,000 as the amount.
Perfect.
How complicated the issue is doesn't affect it. And therefore you need to be able to be prepared and argue a legal case just like a lawyer would in a big court. All it is extra zeros.
That's it. And apparently you still argue.
Don't need
$10 Yeah.
But when you're dealing with civil litigation, the only thing that takes it out of one court and puts it in another is the number of zeros. And the complication of the issue has nothing to do with it. You're going to rely on the same precedents. It's a $20 billion case, Roger suing Bell.
Yes.
Here's the precedent. If it's a $20,000 case, Joe's Plumbing suing Bob's subcontracting.
Scott, I'm cutting you off. Ladies, come here and Sandeep. That's Scott. Scott,
Yes?
this is Sandeep, and he's asking you about the presentation.
Are you going to present anything
Okay, so that
like
computer's
PowerPoint
going
We have a YouTube video that'll actually kick off, and that is the only, I guess, multimedia where we're going to. So Lori has the link to the YouTube video.
Okay, so she can just send it to all the time because video will not work very well when it's like a live stream on the internet. So that YouTube video will not work. So people will have problems.
Do you need that link?
Lori has that link, but she would have sent to everyone.
So everybody's just going to remotely trigger the link on their own.
Whenever you want to. You want them to look at the link, just tell them. You can go to the link and they can make it call them.
And will I have a version of it running in here so at least I know what the time is?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So if we can trigger the link on here, tell everybody to trigger the link on their computer wherever they're at. Now I understand.
Okay, that should be. Yeah. So you're planning to stand here?
I want, you need me standing still?
I would say because the camera is there, so I will try to push the camera here. So I will try to capture.
I can have a few feet, right? Like I'm not going to leave and go into the hall. I am going to kind of move.
Yeah, if you can have your ear, because I need to put a microphone as well for you, so that it's capture your voice.
A wireless?
No, I have a wired one.
Okay.
But this is a
golfer, eh? He fell over, he thought that was so funny.
Partaker of beverages come along with
So I better get myself ready. I gotta drive up to the cottage. Contractors showing up at 8. Oh, actually, yes, it
I call it a jump. The only way things related to my client.
Very nice. Okay, so Scott, you'll be able to. Oh, we are not on camera. Emily is on camera. Okay. Catherine, you're in front of Sure, sure. And I will enjoy it. It's very nice from the website. Oh yeah, yeah, you speak. You speak first, then I'll speak, then have fun.
Hello everyone. Can I have your attention please? We're just going to start in a couple of minutes. So just some technical housekeeping before we start so that we don't have any interruption with the system. So for this class, we do have 2 microphones. These 4 microphones are pretty sensitive. It will catch like area around 8 feet. So anybody speaking within 8 feet from this microphone, it will catch their audio. If somebody wants to speak from further, they need to be loud so that it will get their voice. And I would request if you can keep your cell phones on silent mode or something, because that really interferes with our system here. So that will be one thing. And for live stream viewers, I would suggest if you see any freezing video, you just need to refresh the link we have provided, or else you can just refresh the media player itself embedded on our class page. So that should be fine, and we are good now.
Okay.
You are live now.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name's Laurie Marshall, and I have to apologize for the late start. I didn't realize there's poor communication. Our technical person is on a bus from Poland to Budapest. So thank you for Sandeep coming in and helping us out. The chat feature, everything should be working. If anyone online has a problem, you can just type in on the chat and the girls will get back to you. We'll be stopping the presentation just very briefly every 15 minutes to make sure we can get all the chat questions in if there are any. Okay, so we'll be taking one break. It will be 10 minutes on the dot, and the flyer has the hours. I will let you know. So we have Scott McEachern from McEachern Demel, who is annually, he presents our professional writing with me, and well, I present with you a little bit. You do most of it. And we've refreshed it this year, so instead of claims, we're really focusing on defenses by request. And opinion letters, I'll be doing in the second part, opinion letters, interim reporting letters, and everyone should have the package, whether you were here live or via webcast. You should have the materials emailed to you. Okay, so if you don't, you can email me or PM me on Facebook, and I can get those materials to you. And without further ado, Scott, welcome, and thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Laurie, and everybody here, firstly, for having me. This is always a fun talk to give. I think we always do it in September. I don't know why. But thank you very much, Fresh Faces. I know a few people here. Bill, Marty, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Tracy, Laurie, of course, everybody else, and then a number of Fresh Faces, which I understand is a mix of paralegals, second-year students, and we even have some first-year students that are evaluating what they're getting themselves into. So, as Laurie said, she has some of the topic that she's going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk generally just about good writing skills to lead things off. We're going to go through a few things on writing skills, and none of this has to be gospel. And I'm going to walk you through things that I've learned over the last 20-ish, 30, almost 30 years that I've been writing legal or business letters. And I understand there was a bio sent out about myself. I don't have it, so I'll just quickly give you a bit of a background. Before I got into the legal business, I was actually in the insurance business. I was 18 years as a commercial insurance broker. I started in insurance in 1991. And I estimate that since 1991, what is that, 26 years now, I have written probably about 100,000 business letters. Now, most people would say 100,000 business letters, come on, that's got to be a bit of an exaggeration. But if you break it down and do the math, it's actually not that outrageous. And you'll find, just by doing 5 or 6 business letters in a day, times 5 days a week, times 50 weeks in a year, times 26 years, you get well up into the thousands. I don't know if my math is accurate on that, but that's the estimate with it. So what I want to do tonight is start off sharing some of that experience writing business letters, people that have mentored myself and some of their hints and tips and suggestions, rules of writing a good business letter, rules of writing a good legal letter, etc., and we'll touch on those things. So everybody received a handout. I understand it was emailed. We're no longer handing them out at the door, and those of you that are watching elsewhere, we presume that you received the handout and you have it. Offsite should have our YouTube link. So if they want to pull that up right now, the YouTube, and we have a short video that I'd like to share with you. So anybody here seen that video before? Yes, Catherine, you have, because you've been to my presentation before. Anybody else? I did. Alex, you've seen this too as well? Yeah. So here's a question for you. Now, what was the underlying purpose in that message? What was the purpose of showing you this video? And of course, those that are watching from home or elsewhere, feel free to jump in if you wish. Anybody here? Catherine, if you've been here before, do you want to take a shot? No?
I think it's about the power of words.
The Power of Words, the title of the video. Actually, it's, you know,
The power of words. That's exactly what it does.
it sounds like a funny answer because that's the title of the video, but that's essentially exactly what the answer is. That video is used to demonstrate that the manner in which we say something can be much more important than just what we're saying. And what was the underlying ploy that that video used? Trying to appeal to our emotions. Because we're emotional beings. So, first time I watched that, I got a bit of a tear. I don't know about how, the first time you guys saw it, which was a second ago. But it is a bit of a tearjerker and really lets you know that we are emotional beings. So a good writer is going to appeal to the inner senses of the reader by provoking emotion. And we find that if we've read certain novels, certainly romance novels, are going to get the attention of a reader and so forth. For those of you that are second year that have been dealing with especially our Helen Lightstone here at Durham College, we know very much about the underlying interests, needs, wants, and desires of our target person. And then is anybody here taking Helen Lightstone's mediation class right now? Okay. So how many times have you heard that come out of her mouth so far? And we're only, second week in the course?
Third week and I've lost track.
Third week and you lost track. Try to count. I'm sure it comes out 10 times each class. So I have a book in my office, and when somebody comes into the office, I tell them it's the most important book in the entire office. I have a wall that's filled with bookshelf. I have the Dominion Law reports up there, legal books, every course that I've took here at Durham College, many other books and so forth. And I'll ask people every once in a while, what's the most important book? There's a book on the shelf, Zig Ziglar's Secrets of Closing the Sale. Anybody know who Zig Ziglar is? Zig Ziglar is one of those sales motivational type guys. Has nothing to do with law, but I call it the most important book in my entire office. I'm going to suggest you write that down. Zig Ziglar's Secrets of Closing the Sale. And I read that book for the first time back in 1988. I'm not going to tell you what the content of the book is. We don't have time for that. But one of the things that Zig Ziglar says in that book is he says people don't buy for logical reasons. They buy for emotional reasons. They may have a logical reason that they need to make a purchase, but why are they going to buy from you? Why are they going to buy that exact model of whatever it is that you're selling? In our case, we're going to be selling legal services and so forth. And people are going to buy for emotional reasons. That video demonstrated that people are willing to give money more for an emotional reason than a logical reason. And in life, you're going to want to play up to that. Have done or are going to go into sales. All right, so those of you that didn't raise your hand to say that you're essentially saying you're not going to go into sales, raise your hand. Show me those of you again that didn't have your hand up a second ago. All right, so those of you right now that are saying you're not going into sales, so you've never been on a date? When you were born and a day old and you needed to be fed, did you not cry? Try to get your mother to feed you? Because that's a sales pitch. Everything you do in life is sales. So playing up to people's emotions is something that you're going to want to be able to do. And we can do that very powerfully with the words that we choose in our writing. Again, just like the video demonstrated. So, how do we become more powerful writers? How do we communicate more clearly, more concisely, and make sure that our message is getting across in the way that we want it to best get across? And we're going to explore that and discuss it tonight. This is an interactive discussion. I'll be asking you guys questions every once in a while. And feel free to do the same in reverse. If you have a question, put your hand up. I'll try to go to it. Our online viewers, we have some ladies here that are going to keep track of your questions. So feel welcome to interrupt, and we'll try to get to you with your questions as we move along as well. So I have here in the handout material, paragraph says, be sure to consider the audience carefully. Now, who are you speaking to, or who are you writing to? Is it going to be a lawyer? And then what is the level of sophistication of the people that you're going to be communicating with? That's going to be important. Are there going to be potential language barriers? And that are there going to be, education differences? Things that you need to be alert to. What is the vernacular that you're going to use? And it's sometimes best to watch out for certain phrases and expressions. I write in here metaphors, euphemisms, cliches, hyperbole, and the way that we choose our words can sometimes get. Years ago, I listened to a radio program, and the announcer was talking about. It was telling the story about some high up in the U.S. military. Let's call him a general. I can't remember the actual position, but let's say a general was in to see some techies at IBM who were demonstrating, and this is back in the 1960s, but they were demonstrating conversion programs for language conversion. And they said to him, give us an English phrase, we're going to put it in, and you tell us what language you want it to come out in. He says, okay, tell you what, I want to do English to Chinese conversion, and let's have it convert the phrase out of sight, out of mind. So they put that information into the computer, and that 1960s, so the computer does a whole bunch of noise and whatever, and out spits a card with some Chinese characters on it. Well, they ran into the problem that nobody in the room can read the Chinese characters, so now they had to do it in reverse. They stick the Chinese into it, and they're waiting for the English version to come out. Well, lost in translation, in a machine that was designed to do translation, what comes out the other end is invisible idiot. So think about that. Out of sight, out of mind, goes in, comes out in Chinese, put it back in Chinese, and now the result coming back in English is invisible idiot. Out of sight, out of mind, invisible idiot. So, in legal, let's talk about that. That's what we're primarily interested in here, and what we need to focus on when we're drafting things like a demand letter. And I know there's some of you that are going to say, we can't write demand letters. All right, pending litigation warning letter is what I call it. Come up with whatever you need to come up with just to keep the something at bay. I'm not going to say what they are because I'm accredited by them. But if you need to write a letter to somebody, or you need to draft a pleading, especially when we're drafting pleadings, we need to do so on a factual basis. Why? Because that's what a pleading is all about. It's making factual allegations. On Thursday, September 21st, 2017, Scott presented at a CPD. That's a factual allegation. Hopefully somebody will be able to prove it with some evidence, possibly a video of this discussion and affidavits from every one of you, and a judge would accept that, and it would become a finding of fact, but in the meantime we need to make the allegation of fact. Now, in legal writing, it's very different than creative writing. If you were to sit down and write a novel, you're going to want to use tools of a creative writer. In legal writing, we do things slightly differently. We still need to create a picture in people's minds, but we do want to be more specific or more prominent in what we write and avoid distraction. In creative writing, we might get more flowery. using a whole thesaurus full of different adjectives to spice it up and make it smell and look pretty and really paint a vision in people's minds. In legal writing, get to the point. We don't really need to get to that descriptive, and yet there's still a balancing act. As we saw in that video, we still want to play up to people's emotions. So we don't want to completely just be rigid and factual. We always have that sense of balance that we're looking for. I have an example here. Anybody done SABS yet? No, SABS is probably fourth semester, right? No, okay. So nobody's done SABS yet, but if we refer to statutory accident benefits for those that haven't done SABS yet, I have an example in the material here of what would be more of the flowery way of writing. And we say here, the statutory accident benefits section of the standard automobile insurance policy provides wonderful protection against the terrible risks that we are fearfully exposed to every blessed day in which we are attentive drivers, pleasant passengers, or oblivious pedestrians. How many adjectives did we really need in here? So we can rephrase that and write it by taking out the unnecessary adjectives, get a little more direct, and simply write the statutory accident benefits section of the standard automobile insurance policy provides protection against the risks that we are exposed to every day as drivers, passengers, or pedestrians. We've taken the adjectives out and just gotten a little bit more direct with that. Any questions about factual writing? Parallel writing. Similar to the factual writing, and I call it a rule. It doesn't necessarily rule, whatever you want to phrase it as. But similar to the factual writing rule of avoiding these colorful descriptors or excessive adjectives, it's also important to avoid varying the words themselves. So if you're talking about something and you label it, stick with that label. Yes, you can probably call something by a few different words, but that can get confusing because people can lose track of what you're actually referring to. The example I have here in the material, the driver of the car failed to provide due attention as the vehicle entered the intersection and caused the automobile accident. Car, vehicle, automobile. Are we still talking about the same thing? Maybe. But I was on the 401 today, and there was this big white and green thing that passed me on a set of railroad tracks, and it had an engine in front and a bunch of cars in behind. Car can be a train car, can be a car that goes on the highway. There's all kinds of examples of what a car can be. So we can rephrase this to be more specific and more clear and concise by staying with the same word. Quite simply, the driver of the automobile failed to provide due attention as the automobile entered the intersection and caused the automobile accident. Again, we're not trying to write a novel here. It's not creative writing. We don't need to show off that we know every single adjective for what a car or an automobile or a vehicle could be. Let's just stick to one and stay with it and not confuse our readers. Something else with in parallel writing. Who is who? Now, don't turn the page if you haven't already. I have a rule in my office. No personal pronouns. And it's so hard to take that out of your vocabulary, even when we're just shooting the breeze with each other in the office. And I'll do it to somebody. They'll say, hey, you wouldn't believe, I was talking to him last night. Stop. Who's him? No, him, her, he, she, they, them. So I don't know who you're talking about. Here's an example. If I was to say, last night I went to the bar with Susan, where we met up with Sally and Sherry. While we were dancing, she kissed me. Later in the evening, I kissed her. And after all that kissing, she took me home.
Which one?
Who?
All of them.
Who did I kiss? Who kissed me? Who was I dancing with? And who took me home?
If you had a few beers, does it really matter?
No, it doesn't. And being that this is a college crowd, I'm going to say, hey, I'm hoping all of them. I'm not that lucky. But it does make for quite a bit of confusion. And in legal, the last thing that we want to do, legal or just a business letter, the last thing we want to do is confuse a writer or somebody else that we're trying to communicate with. And as I say, if you can start practicing it in your writing, force yourself even to do it in your speech. Because you get up in front of a judge, a little bit nervous, and that there's 4 or 5 parties to the matter, or maybe 2 parties to the matter, but there were 3 witnesses. Well, Your Honor, she said this, and then he saw that, and she, and she, and she. And the judge is like, I don't even know who you're talking about anymore. And I even do this with clients. Hold on here. And I explain to them that it's good that they get into that habit early, because if they're on the witness stand, they start talking he, she, and there's 14 she's in the story, people can lose track real quick. Now, we tend to do this because in our brains, while we're telling a story, we're seeing the story. However, the person you're communicating with doesn't have a magic helmet where they're seeing what is going on in your own mind. So if you have these multiple people and you're referring to multiple he's and she's, this person will track very quick of which one you're talking about. So if we turn the page, I have an example of how we can rewrite this so it is a little clearer. If we simply say, last night I went to the bar with Susan. We met up with Sally and Sherry. While Susan, Sally, Sherry, and I were dancing, Susan kissed me. Later in the evening, I kissed Susan. After all that kissing, Susan took me home. I don't seem to be as much of a player with that story, do I? So, parallel structures. Well, did you notice the parallel structure? The parallel. Drafting lists within writings. Reading is easier to follow and understand when items are separated and structured similarly. This is especially important in legal documents such as pleadings. And I love numbered lists. It's so easy for somebody just to look down at that and see what you're talking about. So the example that I use for this, here in the material, we write, the defendant failed to arrive on time and come prepared and bring documents to the settlement conference. Okay, how many things did he do? If we put it into a numbered list, we could simply say, at settlement conference, the defendant failed, 1, to arrive on 3, to bring documents. And it's clean, it's written in an organized fashion. I like to think that judges will be able to follow that, lawyers on the other side, whoever it is that you're trying to communicate with, they'll get your points a lot easier, quicker. They can just look down a short little list and see that. Now, when we also talk about parallel, you'll notice the first word in that list is 2, 2, and 2 on all 3 points. Rather than writing at settlement conference, the defendant failed to, 1, arrive on time, 2, come prepared, and 3, bring documents. We structure the list so that the first word in that list is always the same. The, 2, 2, 2. And that is simply what's called a parallel structured list. What I call a parallel structured list. Any questions there? You guys are making this way too easy. Do we have any questions from our online audience yet? No? Everybody's doing good? I'm earning my paycheck too easily tonight. Positive writing. So, everybody's heard the rule about double negatives, right?
Yes.
Okay. We all know what a double negative is, but how can we write avoiding negatives altogether? Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have negative things that we need to talk about. It's pretty hard to describe in a legal document that somebody slipped and fell, cracked the back of their head open, and that's a good thing. going to be something that where we have to write about unfortunate incidents, some issues that are problematic. So we may have negative subjects that we need to write about, but we want to write in a positively phrased way. What I mean by that is take the knots out of it. Just like a shoelace, if it's in a knot, we can undo the shoelace, take the knots out of it. That's a writing rule that I like to encourage. Take the knots out of your writing. So I have an example here where we say writing positively doesn't of course being the contraction for does not, require us to avoid negativity. Writing positively means that we do not use negative words. So how do we take the knots out of that sentence? Well, we can rephrase it and simply say, writing positively requires us to refrain from use of negative words rather than avoiding negativity. So the second version of that sentence has no knots in it. We've taken the knots out. Pretty straightforward there, correct? Well, let's try it on a few here. I've left a few blanks in the material as a bit of an exercise. And let's see if we can amend these. Number 1, the student did not arrive on time. We have a question, do we? Oh, okay, we have some answers already. So we have the student arrived at 10 instead of 9:30. Yes, there's no knots in that answer. Thank you to whoever online came up with that one. That's Kayla Vassler. Student was late. The student was late. In fact, that's the exact answer that I had in here. The student was late. All right, so number 2 in the exercise. The witness could not remember. Anybody? Anybody online? The student could not remember. Does anybody want to try to take the witness could not remember. Can we take the not out of that? Yes.
The witness forgot.
The witness forgot. Excellent. Next, the accused is not an honest person. They're a liar. Wonderful.
I'm not sure if that's less negative, though.
What's that?
Is that really that negative?
Well, there's no knots in it. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do is take out the knots. Again, we're going to have negativity. We got to accuse the guy of being a liar or being untruthful. The accused is untruthful. The accused is dishonest. There's a number of different ways that we can take the knots out of that sentence. Next, the clerk did not pay attention. Yes?
The clerk was distracted.
The clerk was distracted. Excellent. I have the clerk was inattentive. How about when we have a couple of them? And here again is why this can get confusing. If you look at number 5 in the exercise, it says, the lease will not become effective if a signed copy is not received by the landlord by March 31st. Huh? So if we take the knots out of that, will it come across?
Be invalid as of March 31st.
Okay, the lease will be invalid as of March 31st. We've left out the condition.
If not signed.
That has a knot in it.
Fake, you know.
How about this? The lease must be signed and received by March 31st. Does that work? So try to take the knots out. It can help your writing become clearer. Yes, it takes a bit of work. We're in the habit of using knots and contractions for not, doesn't, can't, won't. We're in the habit of those quite regularly in our speech, but it will help you in your writing and may even help in the spoken communication as well by trying to limit the uses of not that we have in our words that we choose. I'm most guilty of myself. Lori will tell you that. We need to condense when we're engaging in professional writing. The lawyer on the other side will appreciate it. The judge that has to read a pleading will appreciate it. Your client, when they receive your bill, will appreciate that you didn't write 47 pages, you only wrote 14 instead. We'll get to that because sometimes you do need the 47 pages, but, and Lori's giggling in the back because she knows the way that I write. Wordiness, I say here, wordiness is a plague. A good writer will keep an armament of words that encourage brevity. The facts and point within a business letter or legal document are often hidden within a plethora of unnecessary words. Anybody finding this funny so far?
Yes.
How many unnecessary words am I putting in here?
Lots.
The first sentence here, maybe a good example, wordiness is a plague. But from that point on, I'm breaking the rule on keeping things brief, trying to condense what we're attempting to say. And of course, that's going to be a juggling act as well. We need to keep things brief, and yet we don't want to have omissions in what we write either, especially if it's a legal pleading. Everybody's taking, or this semester you guys doing all claims too? Next semester? Okay. So you've done small claims 1 and you have done a pleading exercise?
That is correct.
Lori's shaking her head no.
Second year.
Second year
First
only?
year, no.
Okay. First,
Paralegals, all yes.
well, yeah, I hope the paralegals have done it already. Okay. So for those first years here, and then I'll just very quickly say...
January.
Sorry?
They'll have me in January.
They'll have it in January. And draft a pleading.
Pardon?
And they will draft a pleading of some sort?
Claim and defense.
Claim and defense. All right. So I'll jump the gun really quickly and simply say for the first years that when I refer to pleading, I'm talking about, hi, I'm suing you in a plaintiff's claim, or a defense of, okay, you're being sued and here's my answer and response back. That's your pleading documents in a court proceeding. And those pleading documents had better contain the argument that you may try to make at trial, or you may find a judge saying, that's not in your pleading. You're now trying to talk about things that were not put on, the other side was not, I'm using not, put on notice of. And no, I'm not going to allow that. You want to argue a legal theory, you have to argue a legal theory that was put into your pleading so they knew it was coming. You're not supposed to be able to have surprises in your pleadings. So there's a balance that's going to be required here. We need to be brief in our letters and other things that we write, as well as our pleadings, but we want to make sure that we don't leave anything out as well. So I have some examples here of some common phrases or things that we may often say that get a little wordy. One of them is, well, blah, blah, blah. That's because of the fact that, why don't we simply just say thus or since or because? Here's another one. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that, I'd like to remind you, there's a quicker way of dealing with that. Something was repeated numerous times. It was recurred, or it was recurring. For those of you that are going to do provincial offenses or accident cases and so forth, now, would we write something such as the inability to come to a complete stop? Or could we write that in a brief fashion simply by saying the failure to stop? Now, to develop the skill of brevity, you need to have a war chest of words that you like to go to. I love the word refrain or fail. I use that quite often. Most of the cases that I deal with are in litigation. I do a little bit of POA and stuff, but provincial offenses. But most of it's in litigation. So I'm constantly alleging that somebody failed to do something, especially with negligence cases. They failed to properly perform repairs of the automobile. So having a handy list of go-to words that encourage brevity, you want to start building a bit of a library for that. And if you find until you have the habit of automatically going to those words, post-it note, whatever you need, stick it on the wall above your computer or where the place is that you tend to write, and use that. Start going to it. And when I say, start using it, go to that, start developing that habit. When is the best time to start developing the habit of good writing? Yes?
Before you actually need it.
Before you need it. But how do you develop a habit before you need it and start doing it?
Exercise.
Practice. Actually, here's something I saw the other day and I love this. Practice makes what? And everybody says practice makes perfect. How many of us are perfect? Lori puts up her hand. Practice will make you better. Don't beat yourself to death if you're not perfect. I'll tell you right now, you're not going to be. I'm using the word not right now, and I just told you 10 minutes ago not to do it. We will never be perfect with what we are trying to do. We can practice getting better. And be gentle on yourself, be fair on yourself, and yet strive for something. Strive constantly to be raising your own bar. So to go back and say, when's the best time to start practicing this, putting these policies, procedures, rules, whatever you want to call them for yourself, into play, the time is always now. So if you're just chatting on Facebook and you want to develop your writing skills and get yourself, develop yourself further, get into the habits of good writing, is that a good time to start practicing this stuff, or is that a good time to simply say, well, that's just my buddy on Facebook? Anybody?
Definitely start practicing.
What's that?
Definitely start practicing right away.
Start practicing what? Right away, in everything that you do. It's very hard to develop a good habit on a part-time basis. I've never been able to do it. And if you're going to be seen as somebody in this profession, as a professional in this profession, it's very hard to do that when we're talking like a goof 1 minute, and then 5 minutes later we're going to put on our professionalism hat and try to write something that comes out in a sophisticated manner. We need to be trying to do that on a constant basis. And I know I got some friends here that are friends with me on Facebook, and I'm sure they're going to give me a couple jabs later, but we do want to be trying to write well everywhere that we write. A legal pleading, even that post-it note that you're leaving on the fridge for your mom or your spouse. Let's start trying to develop the habit as early as we can, as soon as we can. So I was talking about that handy go-to list that encourages brevity. You can put it up on a post-it note beside your computer and start using it immediately, even in your Facebook chats. And I have a list here of some of my favorites. I already mentioned failed, refrain, a couple of my favorites, and you can continue to add some blank space below some of your favorite words that encourage sentences to go from this down to this. How many of you, there's second year students that are here. I hope you all have your placements figured out. Now, here's where Lori's going to start to laugh. But your letters that you're sending out, dear so-and-so, I am looking for a placement. I need a placement because I will not graduate if I don't get placement. And I really need placement really bad because I want to have a happy life after I graduate and I become a paralegal so that I can buy my family things that I love and everything that I want to make my dreams come true. You send that to me at my office, the McEachern DeMel firm. Do you think I'm going to even read your resume? I cannot throw that in the trash any faster. I may give it enough time to call Lori or send Lori an email saying, I got another one. It's about, I refer to it as, yes?
Just repeat what I say in case the people online can't hear. There were 4 in the past 3 months. You, because you've already said it, plus 3.
Plus 3 other firms saying the same thing? Yeah. So I refer to this as narcissistic writing. So where somebody has I, me, and my laced in what they're saying. And sometimes if I'm, we'll call it bored, it doesn't happen too often, but I'll actually reply and give the person a second chance. And suggest to them, you might want to resubmit your cover letter or your cover email. Can you please take the I, me's, and my's out of it? Now, when you're applying for a position, it is about you. It's got to be the hardest thing in the world to take the I, me's, and my's out of is, yeah, I'm looking for a job or I'm looking for a placement. How in the world do you take the I, me's, and my's out of that? Give it a shot. You will be able to figure it out. But it's also a writing habit to develop because it takes that narcissistic sense of what you're trying to say out of your material, and you want to try to flip it and write it to the reader. There's a rule that gets promoted in the firm that when we write something, we don't want to write it from the writer. Write something to the reader. Have it from the reader's perspective. And how do you do that? You get the I, me's, and my's, and put it all in the reader's perspective, which is you and yours. Instead of, I am looking for a placement, by writing to you today, or, in writing today, attached you will find a resume for your review. The person doesn't need you to say, well, whose resume was that? Probably the person that's sending the email. It's a good clue. So try to switch it up that way. Now we have in here, I start off and I call this just simply a good life hint. It's not even a good writing hint. This is a good life hint. If you walk around saying I, me, and my constantly, how many friends do you probably have? But a good life hint. Most people care very little about you. It's a terrible thing to say, but it's a reality. Our spouses, our close family, whatever, yes, they're going to care about you quite deeply. You'll have casual friendships, casual acquaintances. They're going to care about you. The person that you want to meet on the street, the person that you meet for the first time, the employer that you haven't worked a day in their office yet, what do they care about you? And your dreams and, hey, I want to graduate because I want this and I want to buy a nice car. How many of you, if you went into a car dealership and the dealer came up and said, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I want to take my family to Disneyland this year, so I hope you're going to buy a car for me. Come on over here, I got a great car, please buy this. Me and my kids, we want to have a great time when we get to Disneyland. And then you're probably not going to buy a car from that salesman. But the person that comes out and says, demonstrates that, you're looking for what? And how many people do you have in your household that are going to need to be able to drive the home or drive the vehicle? Where do you tend to travel to? What do you like to do in your vehicle? And makes it about you, you will be much more interested in buying from them. So, as we talked earlier, everything is a sales pitch, right? Crying at the age of 1 day to get your mother to feed you, that was a sales pitch. How are we doing here? Online, girls? Good? Okay. Everybody there is finding me boring, so no questions yet? Okay, so I have an example here for you. We write, Dear John, I'm writing to you today. At least there's one you in there. I'm writing to you today because I seek your position on the issue in dispute in which I am the paralegal, as I need to inform my client. Or we could write that, Dear John, By writing to you today, your position is sought in respect of the issue in dispute as between the various parties involved in this matter. There's not a single I, me, or my in that second phrase. So let's try this really quick. See if we can come up with an example here as a class, and our online viewers give it a try as well. There's a sentence here. It says, begin writing a letter that requests confirmation of acceptance of an offer to settle by March 31st. No I, me's, or my's. So we'll give the people online a moment to give that a tackle, and here we are in the class. How would we start that off? Dear Mr. Smith. And all we want to use is yous and yours. How about this? By writing, Dear Mr. Smith. Let's get right to the point. Let's use our brevity lesson we learned a few minutes ago. Dear Mr. Smith, at your earliest convenience, please provide position, or your position, on the offer to settle that was previously provided to you. Your position would be appreciated if received by March 31st. Any I, me's, and my's in that version? And probably about 5 or 6 you and yours. So it's to the reader's perspective. It's about the reader. Any questions on that? Active voice. So the use of active voice sentences avoid confusion by naming the actor and by helping to ensure clarity as to who did what. Now, here's something to write down. I don't have it in the material, but when you're drafting a pleading, a good rule of writing in a pleading is to start off with when, did who, do what. Again, in pleadings, we're making factual allegations. So the facts of any one individual fact, we want to state when it occurred, who did it, and what is it that they did. And maybe they even did it to somebody. So we could have when did who do what, and maybe to who. So an example of this, on September 21st, 2017, Scott said hello to Denise. Hello. Hi, Denise. When did who do what, and maybe to who. I could have just said, if there was no extra person involved in this, on September 21st, 2017, Scott tripped over his own 2 feet. So we've identified the actor, Scott, in that sentence. We identified when it occurred. On the topic here of active voice, we need to make sure that sentences are not missing an actor. Somebody needs to be identified within a sentence. So if we look at a sentence that uses passive voice, we have an example here that says, the contract has to be proffered. Now, the words has to be, as soon as you see that, it's a pretty sure sign that this is a passive sentence. It's also passive because we don't know who we're talking about. The contract needs to be proffered. There's no who's in there. So if we write that in an active voice manner, we would have the landlord will proffer the contract. And we have a couple of other examples. The lease terms are to be decided. That's another clear sign. You see the words to be? You're likely dealing with a passive sentence. We can put that into active voice by adding an actor, the parties. An actor can be plural. The parties shall negotiate final terms. Not just kind of sound a little better too. The lease terms are to be decided, or the parties shall negotiate final terms. And we have another example here. The checks have been mailed. And then we have a blank. Anybody want to take a shot at converting that one into active? Oh, we have somebody up here. The checks are signed by the landlord. Okay. The checks were mailed by the prosecutor. I like that one. Were mailed by the prosecutor. It's got "were" in it. Yeah. Your thoughts?
Prosecutor mailed the checks.
Exactly. So the actor, put the actor in front.
You gotta repeat what I said.
Oh, sorry. Lori, well, can you say it again for me then?
Online.
Prosecutor mailed the check.
The prosecutor mailed the check. So going back to what we talked about a couple minutes ago, when did who do what? If when is not important, it may be, but you still want to have the actor as early as possible, and that will help take away a passive voice sentence or convert a passive voice sentence to an active sentence. So the prosecutor mailed the checks. Now we have an active voice sentence. And thank you, Lori, for that.
And on the screen.
And on screen, yes, absolutely. This is actually my weakest area. This is the area that I'm trying to improve on in my own writing. We said earlier, everything is about trying to get better. None of us are perfect. And just because I'm up here speaking does not mean by far that I'm the perfect writer. Far from it. Lori, and that taught me, I often joke, she taught me everything I know about being a paralegal, including writing. Unfortunate part is she hasn't taught me everything she knows yet. So we have a couple final hints here. Number one, plan your work. We've all heard that. Plan your work, work your plan. Proofread, proofread, proofread. And sometimes when I give this presentation, we have a little video we go to. This being the, what we call it, the PG version of this presentation. We won't go to it right now, but for those of you that want to have some fun, go to YouTube later on your own and do a search in YouTube for the impotence of proofreading. The impotence of proofreading. It's a bit entertaining. Yes, it is rated R. The impotence of proofreading by Taylor Mali, M-A-L-I. I have another final hint in here. Avoid hanging headers. Anybody know what is meant by a hanging header? If we look at the bold header on the handout that says final hints, the word final hints that are in bold on my material that was handed out, that's a header. A hanging header would be one that when we're formatting and we're doing our writing, it causes the header to be the last line on a page, and then the paragraph that goes under that header start on the next page. You want to try to structure your writing so you don't have hanging headers. If you got a title about a new section or a new paragraph or a new subject that you're writing about, well, the title of that subject should not be left on page 7 and that subject starts on page 8. Find a way to make sure that your header moves over along with it. Any questions there? We talked earlier about the importance of pleadings and how you can run into trouble if you don't have something in your pleading that needs to be there, and in its absence you might find a judge that won't let you argue a point of law or a certain fact that you need to help prove your case. Everybody done provincial offenses yet? Okay. Provincial offenses, what's that? You're starting? Okay. So your elements, even in civil litigation, we deal with elements. And the negligence, for example, everybody took that, torts and contracts in semester 1. So what are your elements of a negligence claim? Had to be a duty of care. Had to be a duty of care, the standard of care, it was breached, and so forth. So you need to plead the facts that establish these various elements in your pleading documents themselves. In provincial offenses, the charging notice, and it's usually going to have something in there that says so-and-so failed to do something on the street or did something that he shouldn't have done, and those become the elements. You need to have the elements in what you write. In the handout material, I have a couple cases. One of them is a brand new, fresh case. It's a decision of the Divisional Court, Westwood Mall Holdings Limited versus Kapila, K-A-P-I-L-A, citation 2017 ONSC 5478. And at paragraph 16, the court says the plaintiff is self-represented and his pleadings, blah, 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 are not those of a lawyer. Paragraph 17, this is a small claims court matter. The appellant is essentially asking this court to hold an unrepresented party to the standard of pleading of a represented party. So in this case, the divisional court was saying, that guy, he's a lay person. His pleading does not need to be up to the standards of a lawyer's or a paralegal's. Okay, so then the court is saying that there is a higher standard of pleading for a lawyer or paralegal. And if we go on to the next page, Trapasso versus 2-for-1 Pizza, paragraph 23, a judge actually says it very specifically that way. It may be amongst self-represented litigants that it is too much to ask for proper pleadings, but lawyers and paralegals should be held to a higher standard, small claims court action or not. So your pleadings need to be quality pleadings. Even though we're going to be in the small claims court, doesn't mean you'll get away with the same sort of omissions or lack of clarity and so forth that a self-represented person would get into. It's unfortunate. We get many self-represented people that they, I guess for lack of a better expression, chicken out as trial date is coming. So they'll come into the office going, hi, I need you to represent me in court at trial. And I have to look at their pleading and go, wow, I have to rewrite your pleading. So you can't just hire me for trial. I need to rewrite your pleading document. Of course, if it's less than 30 days to trial, there's a problem because you'll have to get consent of the other side to amend your pleading at that point. If it's also past the 2-year limitation period, you can't add substantive facts. Any facts that are already in there, you can reword somewhat. Again, subject to being still more than 30 days prior to trial. But quite often, these people that were self-represented that show up and say, okay, now I need professional help for the trial, I have to turn them away and say, you're better going to court on your own, because if I go to court and that's the pleading, 6 of the things I need to argue, the judge may tell me I'm not allowed to argue it because it wasn't in the pleading. And the judge will look at me and say, you're a professional paralegal, your pleading, and you inherit it from the client. He may have written it, but you're here now. Your pleading needs to be up to the standards of a paralegal, what the court would expect of a paralegal. Yes?
Would you be able to use this against another represented party that you're going against, that their standard of quality is not up to par?
Absolutely. In fact, yes, okay, so we have the question of, could you use this case law or this argument to argue in court against another represented party that their standard of pleading was not up to par? So the answer to the question, in my experience, again, I'm no judge, so who really am I? Right? It's going to be up to the judge of the day when you come up in that situation and make that argument. But in my experience, I have made that argument and had judges look at the other side saying, yeah, you're not going down that path. In fact, I learned it the hard way. Somebody had drafted a pleading. I said, sure, I'll come in and I'll do the trial. Started going down a path of facts that I needed to prove. And the judge says, well, hold on here. Where's that in the pleading? Well, Your Honor, I didn't draft the pleading. So-and-so drafted the pleading. I'm just here to do the trial. And the judge is, I don't care whether you're just here to do the trial. You're here to do the trial. You're a paralegal. Where's the pleading that's up to snuff? So absolutely, you want to make sure you have good pleadings that are ready to go. The case law says your pleading needs to be written to a good standard. So we have a defense pleading. How are we doing for when we take the break? Okay, we're doing good. So we have a sample defense pleading here for us to go through tonight. This is a pleading from an actual case that my office is handling. So, of course, it's redacted. I hope I managed to redact every reference to anybody's name in this document. Reality is it's a public document anyway, so and it's filed with the court. Anybody could go down there to read it. But, and just before I start to review the beat of this, again, this is the way that we would write a pleading at the McEachern DeMel firm. It is not the way that a pleading has to be written by everybody out there. And everything that I've talked about tonight, this is just my sort of best practice rules. A couple of my own best practice rules are contrary to what Lori taught me in school, and it's done intentionally. Part of it is I believe very much in branding the firm. So when my pleadings show up at the clerk's office at the courthouse, the lawyer on the other side gets a copy of it, a judge reads it in chambers, before they even see the name McEachern DeMel on this document, I want them to be going, wow, that must have come from the McEachern DeMel office. Oh, it did. They can tell just by the way that it's structured, written, organized. Things as simple as the way I do my little C/Os. Have your unique little branding trademarks, things that you do that are unique and make them a certain style in your office. The fonts that you use. You got 15 people that work in your office. You'll probably find if it's a very, I don't want to call it strict, because that seems like a harsh word, but if it's a very structured, organized, professional office, there will be a font that everybody in that office uses on all documents. There will be a certain structure and an organization to it. Doesn't mean that they're creating clones. And I try to tell those that come to the McEachern DeMel firm, we're not looking to have Scott McEachern clones in the office. What we are looking for is to have some consistency. So pick up some of the pleadings, spend your a few minutes going through the filing cabinet, look at pleadings, and digest the way that those are structured and organized. And you'll come up with your own style too. Nurture that, develop it, have your own style, and don't feel that if it's not exactly like I'm talking about tonight that it's wrong. Not wrong, it's just your own style. Take what you get out of this tonight and what you don't feel works for you, leave it alone.
No better pleasure than having a judge acknowledge your work knowing that you've done it.
So the comment from the huge crowd that we have here tonight,
Miss Leanne.
comment from Leanne was that there's nothing better, no better feeling than having a judge recognize that your work is quality work. And I think we'd all have to agree with that. You start to get pats on the back from a judge, that is very flattering. I'll brag a little bit, but trying to make the same point. There's a case that came out in July. It's a construction law case on defects And the majority of the work that I do, about 30 to 40% of my cases are construction defect cases. So I got reading the case, wow, that's written very similar to the way that I would write. That is the way that I went to my website article on defective workmanship, and not only were the words verbatim, but I've been wanting to for months now. I've just been too busy to go to that particular web page and update it because there's some spelling mistakes and grammar errors in it. And the case decision that the judge issued has the exact same mistakes in it. The judge copy and pasted my web article and used it in his judicial decision. You want to talk about something that's flattering? When you get a judge doing that, that's going to be flattering, and you then know that, one, you're writing well. Hopefully you knew what you're talking about, because the judge just made case law out of it. And there's nothing better for flattery on that. The awkward part of that entire situation was I'd write to the judge and say, in a gentle tone, I wrote it first because I don't want any allegations of plagiarism. I didn't cite this particular case within my article. Why? It's the article. I wrote it 3 years ago. The judge didn't cite my article, unfortunately, in his case decision either, so I had to make sure he knew which came first, the article or the case. Thank you very much for that point, Leanne. So if we turn to the Schedule A of the defense document, we're going to skip past Form 9A, being the actual small claims court form, jump straight to a Schedule A. And this here is one of the areas in which I write my pleadings slightly different than what Laurie Marshall, a defense pleading, what Laurie Marshall will teach you when you're doing a defense in your small claims class here at Durham College, and maybe to what some of our viewers at home that went to other schools were taught in those schools. But again, this is where you're going to develop your own style, slightly different than what I talk about here tonight. But so in this particular claim, I start off with my denial. It's essentially a blanket denial. I say everything that the plaintiff said is inaccurate. Those aren't the words, but that's the gist of paragraph 1 in my defense. Everything the plaintiff said is inaccurate, and we hold them to strict proof thereof. If it is true, they're going to have to prove it. Then, though, we get into admissions. Now, while you're looking at this, and I'm not going to read it to everybody, obviously, because you won't even know what the case is about, this is more about format and structure. Laurie will have taught everybody that took Small Claims 1 what your prayer for relief is. Who can tell me what your prayer for relief is in a pleading in small claims? That's what you're asking for. The plaintiff claims, so 1, the plaintiff claims A, $10,000 in actual damages, B, prejudgment interest, C, post-judgment interest, and so forth. That whole first paragraph is the prayer for relief. So we're, of course, going to deny the prayer for relief. We're denying paragraph 1, but then we get into admissions. We admit the allegations in paragraph 2 and 3. Usually in a plaintiff's claim, paragraph 2 is the plaintiff saying, "Hi, I'm Bob and I live in Durham Region." I'm not really going to fight that hard about that. Force him to bring his ID and the doctor that was there on his birth, and the mailman that delivers his mail to prove where he lives. No, I'm probably going to admit that. But anyway, I don't want to get into the detail of what we're admitting and so forth more than the structure in the way that this document's laid out. So we have denials, now we have our admissions, and then we jump to additional statements. And you'll notice I then have another heading in italics, still bold, the background in regards to originally installed equipment. In this particular case, it's one of those cases where a door-to-door salesman is going around telling you that your furnace and your air conditioner is not good enough and you need better equipment. Don't let anybody fall for that. So
Sorry, Scott, just to
Yeah.
interject for a second, because we've got a kind of a debate going on here. You've noticed that your pleadings are all in Arial font, and is it not supposed to be civil procedure says Times New Roman size 12, or is it Arial? This is kind of the, what's your take on that? Because I've got one over here saying Times, and this one here saying Arial.
I'm in the rules of civil procedure.
No.
So just a moment. Look at these
So
two.
is that just something in your office that you require your pleadings to be in that font?
My pleadings, my letters, everything that leaves my office is done in Arial.
Okay.
Now, again, that's the McEachern DeMel firm, that's our style. As Lori is about to point out, oh, sorry, let me just, for the people watching. So we had Tyler asking a question about the font that I'm using in the document here, and whether it's more appropriate to use Times New Roman rather than Arial, which is in the document. Lori Marshall's looking it up and saying, hey, the rules of civil procedure actually do refer to Times New Roman and point size 12. And Lori's right. The rules.
You're both right. They just.
Oh, we're both right.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
How can we both
Times
be?
New Roman minimum, 11 point Arial minimum.
Gotcha. So Times New Roman has a certain minimum, Arial has a minimum, and you are welcome to use either in accordance to the rules of civil procedure. The old school way is going to be Times New Roman. Look at, Lori's giving me a dirty look.
We're in the new time.
Go grab yourself a pleading that was written 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Most of them are going to be in a Times New Roman font. These days, especially because I like to brand my firm, be a little different, stand out there in some way that's not going to have a judge going, wow, this guy's really out there. No, but we do want to be noticeably
Size 14.
We do want to be noticeably different without offending the rules and practices and general style of legal. We're not trying to get creative here, so we're also using white paper. Nothing's going out, fluorescent pages. But my office, the McEachern DeMel firm, we want to have a unique look to our material so it does stand out and gets noted and noticed, as mentioned earlier. All right. Any other questions about the font?
No, I have to reopen it up again, though, sorry.
Okay, no worries.
But we won, okay? So.
We won.
2 against 1. 2 against 1.
I hope you had a bet going of some sort. So, again, this is mostly about structure, the way that we've organized the document itself. In this presentation, we're not going to talk about the content of this, but you'll pick up on it with some of the rules. If you do actually read this entire pleading, and you'll pick up on it with some of the rules that we talked about earlier. You're going to see a numbered list. You're going to see parallel writing, 2, 2, 2, in that numbered list, or the. You're going to see that rule being followed of when did who do what, and maybe the who. And I did leave a name in here. I'm seeing it now, unfortunately, at paragraph 7. I meant to redact this.
Let's get there.
What's that?
Point it out, get there.
You guys were just about to point that out? Okay. So paragraph 7, let's look at paragraph 7. Do we have the when as the lead off? Subsequently, in 2010, there was when. The who being the actor, and if we put the actor up front, simply only after the when, it's going to help us avoid passive writing and help make sure that this is going to be an active voice sentence. So now we have subsequently in June 2010, when Kevin, the actor, the who, purchased the system, and such a system was installed within the premises by blank home comfort experts. So now we have when, did who, do what, and maybe a second who. And the second who in this is blank home comfort experts. So you'll notice, if you do read this, we're following the rules of of writing that we talked about earlier. We should be looking at this document going, okay, here's where the headings are, here's the fonts. We have, sometimes the heading is in italics, sometimes it's not, and it's because the subheadings, the subsections, are going to be bold and italic. The actual subject headings, the main subject headings, are staying in just bold without being in italics. Pick up on stuff like that. Look for that sort of stuff. Train your eye to see the big picture, the fine details. McEachern DeMel firm, to go back to talking about resumes and applications for placement or applications for a job. People constantly lie to me. You're looking for a job or you're looking for a placement, and instantly you start lying to me. What do I mean by lying? It's not an outright lie, but one of the things I get such a kick out of is opening up a resume document and seeing nothing in there that is creative use of Microsoft Word. All it looks like is somebody went and sat down in front of their computer, double-click on that little blue W, and started typing away, and one of the things that they write and say is, I am a proficient user of Microsoft Word. No, everything's in Times New Roman, which is the default font. It's in point size 12. You didn't move the margins anywhere. You didn't use any tables whatsoever. Your bullets are the little round dot rather than, say, a square dot or a check mark. You're proficient in Word. You certainly didn't show that to me. You showed that you know how to double-click a blue W on your screen on your computer and just start typing away. Don't lie to me. I will look for stuff like that. And you as legal professionals need to know that people at the other end are going to be looking for that, but you also want to develop the habit yourself. Not because you're going to be reviewing resumes, you're going to be looking at evidence. What's there, what's not there. That's what you're wanting to find. Marty's actually really good at this. What's not there? The skill of what is missing. What does something not say? What's absent? What's omitted? There's 5 pieces of evidence that should exist. Something had to have happened. Where's the evidence of it? It's missing. You'll learn a concept called adverse inference. If it's missing, but it obviously exists, then the reason you didn't bring it here today is because it works against you, doesn't it? So the court will take an adverse inference and say, no, you had under your control the opportunity to bring your medical records. You're saying that you have a permanent medical condition, but you didn't bring your medical record that says you do. The court is going to take an adverse inference and presume that you're lying about that. You had the opportunity to prove it and you didn't. So continuing on with the style of the document, again, if we look at paragraph 14, blank made false and inaccurate representations knowingly or with indifference to truth, including false and inaccurate representations that, among other things, A, the existing heating, B, the existing heating, C, the existing heating, D, the, E, the, F, the. This entire numbered list, we now have it in that parallel structure that we were talking about earlier. Every word starts off, or every phrase, every sentence starts off with the. Thing you'll notice at paragraph 18. You know, I was talking earlier about looking for those tiny little details, and when you develop the habit of it, it'll actually become very easy. These things will jump out at you at 900 miles an hour. Look at the page number. Anybody know something funny about the page number? It's the first thing I noticed when I opened this earlier. And what's that?
It's 28 pages long.
20. Is it really?
Yes.
How long is this thing? It's 12 pages long.
Oh, that's the whole thing. Okay.
The whole document. No, the actual page number in the pleading. So it's at the top of the page. Notice the little tick marks beside the number? You notice one of them is longer than the other? I actually wrote this myself. I need to slap myself on that. Should not leave my office. Something that simple would get corrected in my office. So what else do we have in the pleading? There's many examples of numbered lists. We have it again at 33, which again is in parallel structure, the. And if you do take the time to read through this, going back to that point we talked about earlier, you're going to see all kinds of references to specific sections of the Consumer Protection Act. Again, I'm setting myself up to make sure that if this matter goes to trial, and I want to argue a legal theory that relates to a certain section of the Consumer Protection Act, I'm not going to get a judge and say, nope, you're not arguing that, Mr. McEachran, when Mr. Preddy stands up and says, objection, Your Honor, we were never put to notice that he was going to argue that section of the Consumer Protection Act. And you will. He's good. And I will have to scramble with the client that's looking at me going, something. So you want to be detailed in your pleadings, and yet here's something that's very difficult. Whether it's in a pleading, whether it's in a letter that you write, and it's always that balance, and this will only come through experience. And the balance of being detailed and vague, and when you need to be. If you'll read through this, there's places where I make the allegation that the opposing side failed to properly inspect and install the furnace. Failed to properly inspect. Why? Because he didn't run a Xerox 3278 for 32 minutes, which is the proper manufacturer's specification. Well, now I'm getting too detailed, because now I'm going to have to prove that that is the exact specification. And if it turns out, well, he didn't use the Xerox model, he used the Canon model. Well, now my case may be a little weaker because I was wrong in my factual allegation. So I want to have a vague fact alleged and then try to prove that. Now, paralegal or lawyer on the other side might say, no, we need more details and issue a demand, what's called a demand for particulars, and you'll have to deal with that then. This comes through experience. Again, it's a balancing act. How to be vague and how to be specific or detailed at the same time. And sometimes we think it is always best to be very specific. This is terrible, but boy, is this about to make the point. I could say something very vague right now. I like children. Depends. It depends. But I like children. That's a vague statement. Now, if I get a little more specific and say I like 8-year-old little boys, okay, now it's kind of creepy. It's more specific, but is it really that good of a sentence? No, it's very creepy. So again, we're always trying to find that balance of being vague and being specific. And I can't give you a writing rule on that. And you're going to have to use your own common sense. You're going to have to use your own experience and develop when that is necessary. What I can say as a writing rule is, especially if it's in a pleading document, be specific enough that you don't hem yourself into a corner where you can't argue something because the judge says you didn't let him know that that was a legal theory or a pathway that you were going to go down and try to argue because you didn't put it into your pleading. Put it vague enough into your pleading that if he tries to stand up later and say, hey, you didn't put the specifics in there, you can say, Your Honor, it's trial date. He's had 1.5 years to issue a demand for particulars if he really needed to know more detail about it. Because he didn't issue a demand for particulars, it's presumed an adverse inference that he understood what I was talking about or where I was going. And the judge will make that call, whether it's specific or vague. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the Schedule A, just for my own curiosity. When you call it Schedule A, what would you call documents attached to it?
Okay. So the question is, when you call it Schedule A, what would you call documents attached to it, such as documents that may be evidentiary? And the rules of pleading in small claims court say that you are supposed to, in fact, the rule does say shall. And I'm very glad you brought this up, Mr. Preddy, in that I'm a bit of a rebel on that one, but I'll answer your question first. So, Schedule A, yes, my pleading would be the Schedule A. The additional documents that you're supposed to, shall, attach as the evidence that are relevant to your pleading document, they remain as schedules. We see often where a paralegal will mark them as exhibits. An exhibit is only a document attached to an affidavit to support the statements made in the affidavit, because it must be sworn. An exhibit is something that is either sworn to within an affidavit or sworn to in court and entered as an exhibit there in the courtroom. Lori, you.
I represented against a party last year. The representative had marked every single document attached to their claim as an exhibit. The judge actually stood up and said, "Who marked these?" And the paralegal had no idea what the judge was referring to. And I didn't answer. And the judge said, only the court has the authority to mark those because they haven't been accepted. So you put it before the person. You say, can you tell me what this document is? The person says, it's a letter from my best friend that says I'm the best person. Objection, character. And the judge says, sustained. And you can't use it. Right? So you not mark your own documents as exhibits. So one time, I wasn't yelled at. Someone else wasn't yelled at.
So for our listeners at home, just in case you couldn't hear Lori, she was saying that there was a situation where she was present in a courtroom and watched a judge stand up and ask who had marked these documents as exhibits when they had not yet been tendered to a witness and the information come out before the court so that the court could then decide the admissibility, accept the document, and mark it as an exhibit. Documents should not be marked as an exhibit prior to that courtroom process. We call them schedules up until that point. On that, if we look at small claims for the paralegals that are out there, students, my apology, this one may go a little bit over your head at this point. Rule 7 says that in a plaintiff's claim, and Rule 9 in a defense document says that you shall attach the documents in Rule 7 to which the claim is based. A claim typically will only ever be based on a contract. What is the cause of action? Maybe breach of contract? Well, if the cause of action, the reason that the lawsuit exists is going to be for breach of a contract, well, that claim is based on a contract. So go ahead and attach the contract to it. But if it's breached, say, by faulty workmanship, like some of the cases that I deal with, and I have 3 expert reports, all of them are 30 pages long, those expert reports are not which the claim is based on. Those expert reports will be the evidence to prove that the contract was breached. So they will be relied on as evidence, but they are not what the claim is based on. Rule 7 says you're to attach the documents upon which the claim is based. Rule 13, the disclosure rule prior to settlement conference, will say that you're to disclose the documents that you will rely on. There's a difference there between based and rely. And in my office, we have a rule. We basically do it the same way that the Superior Court would do it, or the higher court. We just issue the claim and have the other stuff come later, or in a separate binded book that's going to be convenient for a courtroom trial. Having a massive documents attached to a pleading makes a real mess to the actual court trial proceeding if there's no separate bound brief later, or even loose documents that can be tendered later. We actually ran into that last Friday at the trial that I was doing last Friday, where one of the parties had attached all their evidence to their original defense document, and in the court, the judge, you can tell he was angry, he's tearing the pages apart so that we can have actual exhibit documents entered that is not part of the pleading document itself. And yet the rule says to do that. But it's quite an inconvenience. Yes, Mr. President.
I have a two-part question. One is, referring to paragraph 57, this is just a stylized question. You've written, respectfully submit that the plaintiff claim should be dismissed with cause. At what point do you use substantial or partial indemnity, or do you use that?
So the question for our viewers at home, referring to paragraph 57 of this defense pleading, Mr. Preddy is asking, at what point would I be asking for costs based on substantial indemnity rather than partial indemnity? My answer to that is going to be, it depends on the severity of the allegation that was made. If there's an allegation of fraud or some sort of intentional conduct made by a plaintiff, I'm going to be asking for full indemnity, substantial indemnity, everything including, your firstborn, for making an allegation that if you're going to hold that one out there, you better prove it in a court of law. For things like negligence, or where there was not an intentional act, but there was an unfortunate situation, pretty sure that the court is only going to award partial indemnity. But there's actually case law on that. In the small claims court, Fullerton, Marty, you brought this one to my attention actually about a year ago. I forget the actual case name. It's something Fullerton. I don't have it off the top of my head. And it essentially says the small claims courts to provide full indemnity up to the limit per the rules. So your Section 29 Courts of Justice Act, your Section 50 or your 15% limit. In this case, basically says the courts to provide you with full indemnity. Now, if the opposing side has also asked for full indemnity in their plaintiff's claim, then I'll usually ask for full indemnity on my defense. In fact, going back to Mr. Gobin, very creative way of asking for that. What was that Latin you used, Marty? Pro bonum.
Quod bonum pro usus est bonum pro generis.
Wow, can you spell that?
Not all of it's Latin.
Here, just write it.
So Mr. Gobin was just saying that he will ask for costs where the plaintiff asked for full indemnity and failed their case, so the defendant will ask for costs on the basis of quod bonum pro usus
Est bonum pro generis.
Est bonum pro genderis. And the joke with that is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, in Latin. And yes, this gentleman put it into his cost submissions and submitted that to court.
We got cost, didn't we?
Yes, full indemnity, in fact, up to the court, up to the limit. And so that was That's Mr. Govins. I'm not going to steal that. Yes, Mr. Preddy.
So the second part of my two-part question, the last part actually, is you included 57 paragraphs here. To my curiosity, how big was the claim?
This claim is going to be the entire, well, it's $19,000 plus some interest and costs. And this ends up being a fairly complex defense because we're into some common law defenses, misrepresentation, and but for the misrepresentation, there would never be a contract signed. So yes, there's a contract with somebody's signature on it. It's one of the things that I emphasize that when I actually teach, not just writing, but some substantive law classes. Run into this all the time. I hate to call it this, but I refer to them as contract heads. And oh, but there's a contract. I don't care about a contract. I don't care about a blue signature. I don't care that it was witnessed by somebody's mother. If the, pardon the expression, BS was deep enough that led to the signature on the contract, is that a legally binding and enforceable contract? Everybody in this room took torts and contracts in first semester. Everybody at home that's a paralegal or a student somewhere else, you all took torts and contracts in first semester. What is one of the elements of a contract? Intention. Thank you. Who's just said that? Mr. Alex. Alex, with intention. Does somebody intend to put their signature on a contract when they have been led a line of BS a mile deep? I doubt it. There's not too many people that would go, oh, you're completely lying to me. Everything that you've told me is absolutely untrue. Where do I sign? There would be very little intention in that contract. And tort law, being misrepresentation, will trump that. If you read the case law, misrepresentation, especially a fraudulent misrepresentation, is going to trump a contract. You're going to have the right to rescind in common law tort. You're also in this particular situation, because it was a business-consumer transaction, there's going to be a right to rescind statutorily per the Consumer Protection Act. And Lori's waving at me probably because I'm getting more into substantive law than I am about writing. No. Okay, yes, Lori.
So you have, without getting into, I don't know the case, you have a written, signed contract, and you are basing your defense on parole evidence?
No, much more than that. So,
Repeat.
yeah.
Sorry.
So Lori's asking or stating there's a written signed contract, and am I basing my case on parole evidence? And the answer is partly yes.
Under what exception?
Well, and partly no. I'm not going heavily in there. I'm more focusing on the statutory right of rescission
I'd
in
like
the
to be on
Consumer
the other
Protection
side.
Act. Lori would like to be on the other side. So, okay. Remember I was talking a few minutes ago about paralegals that are contract heads? Lori may be one of them, and of course, hey, that's part of the fun of being a paralegal, in that, is a judge going to go, I don't care how much BS this person gave you, you still ended up signing the document? Or are you going to have a judge going, might have a contract with a signature on it, but that load of BS, I believe that there was a load of BS before the signature got there, and you would not have signed that if you knew the real truth, so therefore I'm not considering that an enforceable contract. And it may come down to who is the most eloquent argument on trial day. Now, who is the most eloquent argument is probably going to be the person that practices the most eloquent writing, the most eloquent speaking, expands their vernacular, doesn't say, well, this is just a Facebook chat so I can type like a goof. If you're developing your writing skills, developing your speaking skills, your eloquence, and not because you're trying to become Shakespeare, but your eloquence, your vernacular, your way to get a point across is probably going to develop so that when you have that tough day where you need just that little extra nudge to get a judge onto your side of the argument, you'll be there and you'll be prepared for it. And that's what my talk tonight has been entirely about. How are we now for break time?
Would you like to take a break?
I'd like to take a break because
Everyone's
I've done my
saying yes.
material.
Okay, but we're gonna have to keep it 10 after. We're gonna come back. So smokers, yeah.
Run.
Go
How are you, sir?
Okay, for those people watching online, just clarification. On the flyer, you'll see that the total professionalism hours for this event are 2 professionalism, and it says, all of our qualifiers on the advice of the Law Society, this seminar qualifies for 1 hour and 15 minutes substantive. The Law Society wants paralegals and lawyers to be responsible and to be the judges of whether they learned something. So if you only learned 15 minutes, from what I understand from the Law Society, it's 2 hours professionalism, because those are approved. Long ago those were approved, and you would claim on the portal 15 minutes. If you learned something through the whole thing, I always learn something new. Okay, Scott and I are going up against each other on a parole evidence case. So that's really good. So you have to judge the substantive. That's the only reason we say may qualify. They require us to. And people who are here in person, anyone who wants to, there will be appetizers and networking and visiting at St. Louis afterward. And those people who are online and in person, once I get the logins and the information, which doesn't take long, then your electronic certificate of attendance will be sent to you if you are a licensee. Okay? Thanks. And Scott?
Thanks. So that concludes the discussion that I have here tonight, the formal discussion that I have here tonight about writing. But I do have one other quick thing to talk about before I turn this over to Lori, who's going to go through the reporting letters and opinion letters with you. And it's still about the idea of presentation. Much of what we talked about tonight is the way that you present yourself, the way that you hold yourself out there, the way that you get branded, the way that you get recognized, your style, and how judges and clerks and opposing parties and others will come to recognize that, ooh, that's from so-and-so. I can trust that it's going to be good quality work in there. They should be able to recognize when you've had a bad day. That doesn't really seem like something that Scott would do on a good day. How did he miss that? You want to have that sort of branding, and it comes from, again, your presentation in the way that you write, the way that you style yourself, the way that you format yourself. What does presentation also come in? The way that you carry yourself, the way that you dress yourself. I'm here tonight in a suit and tie. Some of you may have noticed I loosened up the top button a little bit just so that I didn't get a frog in my throat, but I do have my tie straight, pulled up, shoes relatively shiny, they're not perfect, and we have a gentleman from the, a veteran here that night, Bill. Thank you for your service to the country, but I'm sure what division of the service were you in?
Signals.
Signals.
Communications.
Okay, communications. Now, would my shoes pass?
No.
No. They're scuffed up a little bit. But you do want to have a presentation for yourself in the courtroom, at a networking meeting, in class. And Lori, when I was here as a student, how many times in 2 years did you see me without a sport coat? Very rare.
Very rare.
I think, in the last month, I was sick terribly in the last month that I was here, and I came in like a sweatshirt or something for 3 or 4 days just because I was sicker than a dog, still coming to class. But having yourself presentable, you're going to be out there, you're going to be networking. Mr. Gobin has a sport jacket, a tie. And I don't mean to criticize those of you that are not dressed to that level. I'm simply suggesting that you're going to be out there mingling with the public, mingling with each other. You're going to be going to court at court, and that you want to be certainly holding yourself up and being presentable, even if you're not in the courtroom on a given day. If I know that I have to go to the clerk's counter at the courthouse, I will put on the very least, a button-up shirt and a sport jacket, maybe a nice pair of jeans. I may wear jeans, and I will have sort of a casual outfit on, but I do not know what judge I'm going to bump into in the hall, what lawyer I'm going to bump into in the hall, what opposing party I'm going to bump into in the hall, or whether I will be sitting there and the clerk will look at some self-represented pleading and the self-represented person saying, what should I put in here? And the clerk better say, sorry, we cannot provide legal advice, but that gentleman over there, Mr. McEachern from McEachern DeMel, he's a paralegal. You might want to talk to him. And I don't want that prospective client to go, what a schmuck he looks like today. So the way that you present yourself counts. It matters. And you never know when you're making your first impression or when you've made a previously good impression, and you can flush it down the toilet really quick by not being presentable in a given moment. That doesn't mean you need to wear a three-piece suit to go to the swimming pool, of course. So before I finish up and turn it over to Lori to discuss the letters, any final questions? Yes?
Where does the prayer of relief go in a Schedule A?
Where does it go in a Schedule A? Casey.
She doesn't believe you, so she's asking you for
The question for those viewing at home.
It's a Green Book question.
You really want me to talk about the Green Book?
No,
we don't have all night.
All right. The prayer for relief is always going to be paragraph 1 in the Schedule A of your plaintiff's claim.
Thank you.
Always. Now, with that said, it's also going to be paragraph 1. I have a claim that I just dealt with recently where the paragraph 1 is actually the second portion of the claim. So it's basically it starts off, no paragraph number. The plaintiff claims A, B, C, D. Claims even that a person should lose their license. So actually it's a malpractice claim against a paralegal in small claims court, drafted by another paralegal. Now, should that paralegal know that a deputy justice in the small claims court does not have the authority to issue an order that another paralegal loses their license? It's a law society issue. It's not a small claims court issue. And that's in the prayer for relief. So the judge that sees that, an opposing side being me, I was on the defense of this case, I look at it and, I'm going to snicker a little bit. I shouldn't admit that, but yeah, I'm going to snicker. Are you kidding me? You don't know what you're doing yet. And your prayer for relief is wrong. You're asking for relief that can't be granted by this court. And then it gets even more humorous when paragraph 1 exists 3 times in the same plaintiff's claim. So there's 3 paragraph 1. So I had to, in my defense document, refer to set 1, set 2, and set 3. The defendant denies paragraph 1 and 2 of set 1, admits paragraph 2 of set 3, and denies paragraph 1 of set 2. And now you got a judge that, in a way, I was mocking the pleading a little bit, not intentionally, but it's going to come out that way, going, wow, this guy's really identified how their pleading is not properly drafted. And they'll be remembered for that. Should I tell the funny story about that case? The really funny story about that case?
Yes.
These guys don't know it yet. You do. I told you last night.
Okay.
So those errors that I just told you about are nothing compared to this one. So we had issued an offer to settle formally in writing. For $1,500, we would settle the case. The McEachern DeMel office got a call earlier in the week wanting to schedule a teleconference to speak with Scott to discuss settlement. I took the call, and the other side started negotiating, saying blah, 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 and we'll settle for $1,000. I'm like, well, hold on here. Don't go anywhere, just so that I can take it to my client and get it confirmed. Let me email you right now what your offer is. You're saying you'll settle for $1,000. All right, I just sent you the email. So hit reply as confirmation that that is your offer, and I will take that to my client. So they reply back and say, yep, that's our offer. I go, excellent. Let me see if I can get my client on the phone right now, and I'll see if I can get that offer accepted. Hang up the phone.
Call them back.
Call. Send an email right back instantly. Go, yep, we accept. This guy just negotiated himself down. My offer was $1,500, and he asks if I'll do it for $1,000. So I hope he never becomes an auctioneer. Work in the wrong direction. And so the ultimate irony is his case, his initial case, was a malpractice claim against a paralegal. So I'm thinking about calling up his client saying, hey, do you want another malpractice claim against a paralegal? Anyways, have fun with your jobs.
Question.
Oh, yes.
So when you get a plaintiff's claim from a self-represented that is just one giant paragraph, how do you best suggest you prepare your defense to that?
Politely.
Yes. What appears to be paragraph 1, what appears to be paragraph 2?
Yeah, and I'll often say, especially because they don't bother numbering it, right? They just have this. It's just a ramble. Okay. So the defendant, and that denies the allegations in, and at least if it's in body, as separate paragraphs, the unnumbered paragraph 1, and sometimes if it's a long ramble, I'll have to say, we admit the allegation within the unnumbered paragraph 1 that the defendant was wearing a yellow shirt, subject to the caveat that it was a canary yellow shirt rather than give me another shade of yellow. Lemon, yellow shirt. So we're now having to do the job that they really should have had in their pleading, which is flesh out the actual meat of the allegations. And it actually makes the job it seems a little complicated, but it can flow from there. I will have examples of that. So if you want to email me and say, hey, Scott, can you give me an example of a pleading that you had to answer to a self-reps pleading? I can give you some samples of what that looks like.
I appreciate that, thank you. What I've done in a situation that I had with it, I've done what appears to be paragraph, what appears to be, just wondered what your thought was on that.
That would be it. And what appears to be, or it appears that. We were talking earlier about being vague rather than be specific, and we're always making allegations. And to keep beside your computer a list of go-to words, and it appears is one of the best words that you'll ever use as a legal professional. Yes, Alex.
My question in regards to this scenario. So, the question to you is, can you bring a motion asking for the court to make an order to the self-rep, actually number the paragraphs so it would be easier for you? Because if I have this scenario right now going on, and I'm inexperienced in trying this out. So it actually complicates things a lot for me personally. And what do I bill client for? So I'm actually spending a couple of hours trying to figure out how to put it in, in a proper order. Can I bring a motion of Thompson to make them do the job?
Okay. So Alex is sitting near the microphone. Can somebody watching at home just quickly tell me, did you pick up that question?
Presumably they are.
Maybe nobody's watching at home anymore.
Gone for
Everybody went for a beer. They figured they're getting their certificates, and that's all they need. Okay, well, if nobody's watching, maybe I don't need to explain the question.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Well, those
Thank you,
three are
Sarah,
good.
Melissa, and yes. So everybody, even there, heard Alex's question. So I'll answer the question. And to start off, Alex, your question was, can I bring a motion? The answer to that portion of your question is yes. You can bring a motion for anything you want at any time. I think what you're really getting at is, would you be successful in getting a judge to order that the self-represented plaintiff number things and get a little bit more detailed or specific? And that is always going to be the ultimate answer to every legal question that ever exists. It depends. It depends. And then, judge of the day, how detailed had they been? How undetailed had they been, and are you going to be able to make the argument that you can't do your job in defense because their pleading is that bad? Where that line gets drawn, it's a gray area,
But what about your experience? Did you ever down something like this? Is there a precedent that actually I could look into the motion or actually?
Well, the precedent would be part of the material that we handed out, where two judges in two cases say that a self-represented can get away with a pleading that's not great. But again, that's a vague line, right? Where is that line drawn?
Well, it kind of does for me. It opens the door for every self-rep to draw such a terrible plaintiff's claim.
That's why they're self-repped.
Yeah, that's why they're self-rep. But you also have to remember, so you're concerned about filing your defense on that,
Yes.
and you're considering filing a motion to have something changed. You're going to have to, your client's going to pay for you to draft the motion and file that motion. Then you're going to attend court on that motion, unless you're doing a basket motion. So the cost is going to be one or the other.
And then you're going to interfere with access to justice.
Yes. So you have to be very careful on your motion if you're
Talk to
looking
me.
at that.
I've actually, where I've gone into trial using case law, where the case law has not been numbered. So I've had to refer to the non-numbered paragraph starting with da-da-da in this case. Where I've actually had the judge go, well, wait a minute, what do you mean not numbered? And it's like, well, if you go to page 7, because it's already citated, then the judge will go, oh yeah, this is not numbered, is it? And this is coming from a judge to a judge, right? So you need to be that one step ahead. You have to be more professional when it comes to that.
You'll do it a
That's
few
why
times,
you're
you'll get there.
paralegal.
Any other questions for me before I turn it over to Lori? Yes, Marty.
I just wanted to weigh on the parole evidence debate.
Okay.
Marty wants to represent with me against you.
Don't think so fast.
Okay.
See, Section 27 of the Courts of Justice Act, all relevant evidence is admissible in small claims court. So the parole evidence rule isn't an objection in small claims, it only goes to weight. And then you can also sue on the tort of deceit too, and apparently if they induced me into this contract in the first place, I'm going to sue for damages.
And that's where this case is actually focused around, is a fraudulent misrepresentation, aka deceit, case. And I'm on board with Marty on this.
Of course you are.
That the deceit, and that trumps the contract. The contract would not exist but for the deceit. Nobody's going to sign it when they're looking at somebody going, oh, you completely lied to me, that's completely untrue, I'm getting into a bad deal, but I'll still sign the contract. The contract would never exist but for the deceit, which happened first. And Lori, I have lots of case law on this. Case law will even say, and it's actually on my article.
You're pretending.
I understand. Okay. I understand. Now that it's been put out there, though, and we're into a substantive law discussion, you'll find it on my website, paralegalsoshawa.com /deceit. And you'll have an article on it with all the case law citation that'll take you there, including case law that'll say even if this person's completely naive and shouldn't have believed what they were told but did anyway, that's not a defense that the defendant can say of, yeah, I completely lied to him, gave him a complete load of BS, but he was too dumb to fall for it, so it's his own fault. There's case law that says no, you can't blame him just for being a dummy.
And that's on your site?
It's on my website.
Yes. That is a site, for those who don't know.
Oh, it's a
Have
book of
it
knowledge.
and put it in your browser for whenever you need anything.
It has been emailed to everybody with
To your tits and bits.
Thank you,
I appreciate your noticing. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me tonight. I'll be chatting a little bit more and available later for those that need to have a little bit more of a chat. But I'm now going to turn it over to Lori, who looks like she's...
has a present for you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. We'll do one in the future regarding evidence in the small claims court. Evidence arguments is what we'll call it. Marty, you are welcome to join us. Okay?
We will be doing one in the future on insurance issues. It's a real hot button with paralegals, and it's going to be a day. Are we not doing a whole day of it?
Once we do it.
Yeah. Well, we'll be talking about it from a broad perspective. That'll come out later. I don't want to get too much into it right now. But just for those that have been asking for it, please do know that it is in the works.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so I'm going to finish off the evening, and I'm going to cover a few things up here. But first, I would like to say that for everyone who doesn't know, you can go to durhamcollege.ca/CIJS. Our CPD calendar is there. We've had so much demand for these third Thursday of every month CPDs that we're now doing 2 on Saturdays from 10 to 2. So our mock trials will be on Saturdays. Yes.
I haven't been on Facebook.
But it's on our website too. Also, October 30th, I will be presenting, and it's different from this one, so you can't get enough, at the Law Society of Upper Canada, available by webcast. I'm one of the presenters in a legal writing CPD on that day. I can't remember the time, but I do. Yeah, I can't remember the time. You'll have to look on the Law Society website. It's $30, okay? And it is 3 professionalism hours. This one, and then in December, we always have a CPD that is 3 professionalism hours also. So no one has a problem getting their professionalism hours. I think that's all I wanted to mention for CPDs. Now, for a little bit of cleanup, Leanne asked a question regarding the font, okay? And then we had a question regarding something else. And where the small claims court rules are silent on something, we are allowed to refer the court to the rules of civil procedure for the Superior Court of Justice. And I don't think in paralegal programs students learn the rules of civil procedure. I know the rules, I'm rusty, but I know the rules. There is a rule within the first 10 rules. I think it's Rule 4, but I could be wrong.
4.01.
Okay. And it tells you about documents. Now, the rules of civil procedure for the Superior Court of Justice were written a long time before the internet existed, before computers existed, and word processors existed. When people like me worked on typewriters. And when we got electric typewriters and electronic typewriters, we had balls that went in. And we could choose Times New Roman or Courier. Those were your 2 fonts. There was no Arial, okay? So the rules of civil procedure, if you want to know about fonts, and I take it, I'm assuming completely, and I could be wrong, but Leanne has found some issues with some things she's been told, okay? Go to the rules of civil procedure. You won't find fonts in the rules of the small claims court, but if they're silent, you can go to the rules of civil procedure. Want to find out your margins? What they have to be? Rules of civil procedure, court documents. You can also go to, and the rules of civil procedure also have corresponding forms to each rule. And then there is what's called O'Brien's forms, and you can go to O'Brien's, and that will give you your guidelines too. So prayer for relief, O'Brien says, paragraph 1, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Okay, so you go to the law and the rules of civil procedure or regulation to the Courts of Justice Act, okay, so their legislation, and you don't believe anything anybody tells you without looking it up. All right, would you agree?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now we have word processors. Well, we're past word processors. We have computers and a whole bunch of fonts that we can choose from. Now, I made a comment I shouldn't have made. There are a number of textbooks, and you may as well know this. It's good for students and it's good for paralegals. There are various categories of legal literature. There is primary mandatory, which is phenomenal. It means you've got a Supreme Court of Canada case. It has the same legal issues, the same facts as your case, and you can take that in and the judge must follow it. Best legal literature you can get. Primary persuasive. Okay, so British Columbia Court of Appeal, not binding. However, it's a case, and you may be able, with really, really effective submissions, to be able to convince a judge that he should follow the reasoning in that case. So, persuasive, doesn't have to follow, not the same jurisdiction. Then we have secondary. Secondary is legal literature that is written by an author. So in my classes, I tell my students, I wish you had an unlimited budget for books. For small claims court, you'd have 3. You'd have the rules of civil procedure, you'd have the rules of the small claims court, and you'd have Larry Olivio, professor at Seneca, just wrote an amazing small claims text. Okay? Really, really good. But if I quote something from Olivio's text, that's secondary. I can quote it to the judge and say, Olivio is quite a distinguished writer. And Your Honor, he has, in effect, interpreted this legislation as, we're using this case, and so on and so on and so on. The judge may consider Scott's article. Scott's article is secondary literature. It is an opinion that Scott came across. So when you read textbooks, they are authors' opinions. Authors can be wrong. Okay? They can be. And you do have to recognize that because it is an author, so it's secondary. Okay? So that is important.
Which relates to the Green Book.
That is an author's opinion.
Yes.
Okay? And we fondly refer to Emma Montgomery texts. I tell my students they are fabulous. They are entry-level textbooks. And it is great. Provincial offenses, I told my students, I'd have you have 9 textbooks if you had an unlimited budget. One is the beginner, Emma Montgomery, Introduction to Provincial Offenses for Paralegals. You can read it in probably 2 weeks, okay, and get a really good beginner overview. But again, you have to use the legislation if you want to really learn the subject. So that in all of their books, they are very, very, very good, but they are very entry level. So that's where that came from. All right, our 2 rules for tonight are Rule 5 and Rule 7. Unfortunately, I have a very, very good example of Rule 7. Okay, duty to licensees and others. I had a call, and I get a lot of these, too many lately. I had a call in the summer from a colleague who was very, very concerned about correspondence that she received from a paralegal's office that was extremely aggressive, extremely aggressive. And the author of the correspondence that did give a legal opinion had a name and paralegal student in the complimentary closing. So I got the call, was it one of mine? I clarified and said, Durham Colleges? They said yes. It wasn't, thank goodness. However, the fact of the matter is, no person who is not licensed can send out correspondence with a legal opinion, including law clerks. It's in the lawyer's rules of conduct. All right, if you're licensed, it's totally different. All right? Secondly, your written correspondence must follow the rules for courtesy and respect toward other licensees. Now, can we make a complaint against a non-licensee? No, we can't. However, hopefully that student learns practice management and ethics, and once the person is licensed, then that won't happen again. Leanne?
Sorry, did you say that we can't file a complaint against a non-licensee?
Not for that, not for a breach of the rules. They're not bound by it. We can if they are acting in our scope and they are not licensed. But not, they have no duty to us whatsoever. None. Yeah. However, the paralegal not supervising the student, but that's not my issue. So that's Rule 7. We have a duty to licensees and others, even in what we write, the correspondence we write. The other rule that this follows, and this is what the letters are for, I love receiving precedents, and I always have in seminars, and I add them to my little file of examples. And so I've given you an opinion letter, which does not have to do with the rules, except it's within the scope of our rules. But more importantly, an interim reporting letter and a reporting letter. And that relates to Rule 5, which is fees and disbursements. If I have a retainer for the pretend small claims court action that I am going to argue against Scott based on the parole evidence rule and Section 27 of the Courts of Justice Act when Scott brings Marty in with him to argue against me, and I will prepare those arguments in advance, I am going to have a retainer from my client ahead of time. It's going to be in my trust account. The rules say, and they're defined in the lawyer's rules of conduct, not the paralegal's rules of conduct, but in the guidelines. You must have completed a matter before you can transfer the money out of trust. So I remember years and years ago, what is the definition of the word completion? Okay? So if I have I've prepared a claim, I've researched the matter. Okay, sorry, I'm going to think of an account. I have met with my client and received my client's instructions. I have researched the matter, prepared the pleading, issued the pleading, served the pleading. At that point, those are my services rendered. So I can transfer trust money once I issue an account. Now, it doesn't say I've gone to trial, because I haven't. So it is not a final account. Therefore, I'm not issuing a final account, and the account must be identified at the top with the word interim, I-N-T-E-R-I-M, in the meantime. Okay? Well, I can't send that letter to the account to the client without a cover letter, because in my humble opinion and professional opinion, it is not acceptable not to include an interim reporting letter to update the client. You can tell your client over and over and over what's happened, but sometimes lay people intimidate themselves with law. They really do. And you have to tell them many times in different ways. So you write it down. I remember years ago when I was in real estate, and a client came in and said, you told me I was going to get a refund from the new home buyers plan, and I haven't gotten it yet. And I said, your deal closed 8 months ago. You should have gotten that 6 months ago. Well, I didn't. I said, you know what, let me pull your file, and we'll look at your reporting letter. I got it right here in this envelope. Second page of the reporting letter said, you must sign the enclosed application to the home buyer's plan and mail it. It didn't say put it in an envelope and then affix a stamp and mail it. Okay? She said, oh my gosh, I didn't read any of that. I knew I wouldn't understand it. Well, you know what? Luckily there isn't a limitation period because you're entitled to $4,500. You went through Christmas without it. Okay? And your clients are exactly the same. Don't kid yourself. They are. So I want to, the first letter, I just want to go through briefly with you. And Scott pointed out, I am the queen of active voice. And I must say to everyone, I can go through these letters and I can see passive 100%. But I can't give a reason for it. I was trained, I started in the offices in 1984, okay, a long time ago. And that was when we used passive voice, and we drafted in passive voice because it sounded, it just sounded more professional, more flowery, okay? It sounded really smart, you know? So that's what we did. Then a book called Legal Drafting came out. A ton of seminars. We had to read books and go to seminars on legal drafting because, lo and behold, they were taking away the flowers. And they went to what was called a plain English style first, which still contained a little bit of Old English. I couldn't accept that one. And then the one I absolutely abhor is modern. And that's what we're at, okay? Which is active voice. So I had to change some of these letters. I was reading them over, talking to Scott, and I said, I gotta let you go. I gotta redraft this letter for this CPD. Now, if you look at the dates, it was 2013, 2014, okay? And interim reports, the first one I'm looking at, why I'm doing that, I've talked to my client. I was in court with my client. My client knows this information. If I don't have this in my client's file, if the Law Society comes out and audits, and I have taken money out of my trust account ahead of time, then I can be in trouble because I didn't report to the client. So, please be advised that we received the replacement checks regarding the above-mentioned matter on such and such a date. We deposited a check, and I enclose a copy of the replacement checks for you. Further to our various discussions, emails and correspondence, and I don't black out, I white out the redacting. For this service in accordance with the endorsement order of the Small Claims Court, and your subsequent confirmation will include a disbursement of $750 per month for bank draft, a fee, and so on. What we were doing was taking in money from the other party. Because our trust account does not have service charges because the banks are not allowed to charge them, and this party on the other side, it was pretty obvious that probably 50% of the checks would be returned NSF. So we said to the client, for a fee, which fee will be less than your NSF fees, we'll take it in through trust, and then we'll send it out to you. Don't ever do it, okay? 3/4 of them were NSF. It was a nightmare, okay? Because when the replacements came in, my trust ledger was just a nightmare matching them all up, okay? Don't ever do it. Law firms do it. I thought, we had no problem doing it. It was just so time-consuming. It wasn't worth it. But anyhow, I told them what they would be invoiced. So then at the end I say, I have included a corrected billing summary because I made a mistake, and if you contact me. So I have included an account marked paid in full. You'll see in the enclosures. The reason it's paid in full is I transferred some of the money they had in trust into my general account to pay this account. Okay? I've reported to them. I have given them details on the account. I attach the report, the account, to their trust ledger statement in my bookkeeping because I'm just OCD for my trust accounting, and then I'm finished. And every client has an interim report because that company, that case went on for 4 years. Like the other side was difficult. Their retainer originally was probably in the range of $2,500. Well, I want to bill every $1,000. So when I looked to pull interim letters, reporting letters, I'll tell you, there were tons of them. Just tons of them because I wasn't letting that money sit there. There's no way. I'm getting that money out and doing the work. Okay, and it's a very hard thing for new paralegals because you get so busy, but you've got to get the money out and pay yourself. So I have another interim report. I'm not going to read it to you. However, it's a much more detailed report. And redacting, like Scott says, it's all finished. It's marked without prejudice. And this one is much, much more detailed about my opinion of where we've been and where we're going on this case. Okay, so it's 3 pages. If there's anything, I'll say, like Scott, if there's anything I haven't redacted, I trust under the rules, everyone will keep it confidential. Okay, but just learning from this, it will really, really help you with doing reports to clients, because I find when I have clients who have been to someone else and they come to me halfway through, they have no reports, they have no opinion letters, nothing. Okay, the second last letter is a final reporting letter. It's a simple one. It was a landlord-tenant. It was a favor I did for somebody because I don't act in landlord-tenant. And this one, we were dealing with a real estate agent on the other side who believed that he could represent in the landlord-tenant board without being a licensee. Had an awful time with this guy. Luckily, we settled it. We settled it for $2,200. My clients had aimed for $1,000, so we were very lucky. And I wanted to be paid. So I send them a report. This is what happened through the case. Account is marked paid in full because the money is in trust. I'm taking it out. Thank you very much. Okay. And the other one, I had to pull this one out, and I thought I would give it to you. And again, confidentiality. This was a letter of opinion, and I was contacted in a Facebook conversation from a paralegal who has a dog bite. And I had been consulted. I've worked on dog cases since the 80s under the Dog Owners Liability Act. But sometimes, yes, it falls under the Dog Owners Liability Act, but falls under insurance. And what this lady had asked for, a friend of mine had asked for me to provide this opinion for her. Okay? And I said I will provide the opinion. And I thought I'm just giving this letter to the paralegal who was bitten so that he has an idea of a couple of the cases. I had pulled them because I don't remember them. And the quantums of dog bites. And one thing I found out, there's a difference between a dog bite and a dog attack. Okay, this lady was clearly attacked. So it gives you an idea, and I've read some of Scott's opinion letters. Both of us write them, and sometimes we have a confidentiality agreement in association, and sometimes we'll bounce ideas off one another. And what you're doing is you're giving a legal opinion. So you have to base that on something. You can't give your personal opinion. And that person is paying you for your legal opinion. Okay? So an opinion letter, you can be bound by it also. So you better do your research very carefully before you send one out. Okay? All right? Are there any questions with that part of it? I suggest highly that you read Rule 5, read Rule 7 of the Paralegal Rules of Conduct. Lastly, I'm hoping you'll help me with this. We included 2 cases for you. There's a third one. You'll have to look it up yourself. It's called the apostrophe case. And in the materials, you will find Oakhurst is one of the cases, and Rogers is the other case. And both of those cases dealt with ambiguities caused by a comma. One was 11 million, one was 3.1. And the apostrophe case dealt with people not showing a possessive by using an apostrophe. So a comma can change the meaning of a sentence. You, and I know you don't say this, you must be perfect when you are drafting your client's pleading, or you will be paying your client. Rogers can afford to pay 3.1 million. Oakhurst could afford to pay 11 million. If your client lost 25,000 because of your ambiguity, I hope you have 25,000 because of your own negligence. Okay, and that's what it is. I'm sorry. I'm saying the things you don't want to hear, and that's my job. Okay, but grammar checks, spell checks, and the CPD I'm doing on October 30th is Don't Think the Law Society Doesn't Watch Facebook, because they contacted me because of my management of Facebook groups in the profession. How on earth did they know? And there's never been apparently there's never been an unacceptable post of mine. And they have made it very clear that when I said, should I redact the names from the posts I use as examples, they said absolutely not. It is social media. We want it posted out there so paralegals attending the CPD realize how important this is. I can search 3 names and I've got enough unacceptable things for all the examples they want to show. Okay, so be very careful. You have a reputation on Facebook. I would assume I don't have Twitter, but you've got a reputation on there. You've got a reputation on LinkedIn. You've got a reputation on email. Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody, and I'm going to hand it over to Scott. I'm going to close myself. Catherine, question?
Is the whited or black marker?
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters. Black marker is more common. I just bought at Costco. I got 10 of the dry whiteout, and I didn't have a Sharpie handy, so I was doing it with dry whiteout.
But can you clarify that in pleadings, it has to be a line. It can't be blacked out. For new paralegals that think that they want to redact something?
Are we redacting something which you should never do in a pleading? You can strike something. So in your amended pleading, when you're striking something that was previously there, yes, it's a line through it, not a redaction. A redaction blacks out everything so you can't read it. A strike, you can still see what was underneath before.
Because you can strike out in pen. That's how you amend, right? We have a question. Does a resource exist where legal tests such as for misrepresentation, negligence, etc., are clearly set out, or is reading lots of case law best practice? I'll say something about this. Reading case law is great, but I would start with a book called The Law and Business Administration in Canada. The Law and Business Administration in Canada by Smythe, Soberman, and Eason. Every 2 years I update that book. It tells you everything. Paralegals aren't taught, apparently, in the program about agency law. You have no idea when an agent's liable, when a principal's liable, or when either one of them could be liable. All right? That book, you can look and read all about the liabilities, agent, principal, and so on. It gives you case law, and you can start from that case law and go further. Yes, the book is called. Thank you.
What is the case?
Oh, the case. The case for the apostrophe. I gave in the handouts the Oakhurst and Rogers and the apostrophe case.
I can't remember the apostrophe case either.
Maybe someone could look it up, or I will look it up, and it could be posted on the Facebook Durham College in brackets CIJS enrichment group. That's where we post a lot of cases, materials, additional questions, answers. Join that group, and it'll give you everything you need. Okay, you were going to deal with the commas, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Oh, we will be doing our first test of recordings from this night. One other thing, there was a comment up above I wanted to address. Someone said in the chat that they would like to see the people who were here. We sent out surveys when we were testing our webcasts, and the surveys, too many came back that it made people dizzy with the camera moving around, because we were showing the people asking the question and then putting the camera back. And the participants said it made them dizzy. So funny enough, tonight I told Sandeep, don't move the camera, okay, because of that. And then we have one for the people. So at the very end, Sandeep is going to just move the camera around. Okay?
You might require a wide-angle lens from me.
Bill, you've been in the whole thing. You look great. Hey, thank you, everybody.
I actually don't have much to add about the comma cases. Those of you can find articles on the web that'll tell you about it. You just do a Google search, the comma case Rogers, and you're going to find out about a comma that was just misplaced or omitted to completely change the wording of a contract, and that resulted in, was it 3.1 million or 2.1 million, but regardless, you're talking millions of dollars because of one comma being missing.
Oakhurst, the judge begins his reasoning with, we are here because of a comma.
That's the judge's decision.
Yeah.
We are here because of a comma.
11 million bucks.
Comma. So, yeah, earlier I said perfection is not necessary. That kind of says that it is. I have to eat my words on that one. You want to strive for perfection. And if you can achieve it, great. And you want to become as close to it as possible. And you cannot simply say, this is no big deal. Just one comma can make an $11 million difference. It is a big deal. Practice good writing. Somebody here says we touched briefly on agents and principles in contract law. Sorry, I thought they had a question there, but yes, and that the only thing that concerns me with that is they're saying we touched briefly on agents and principles in contract law at Annual College. Agent-principal relationships and how liability or obligations to a third party can arise from an agent-principal relationship should be something that we all know very, very well, so that you can plead it, so that you can claim things such as vicarious liability, joint and several liabilities, and other issues that arise from agency
relationships. If you only touched on it briefly, then you need to be studying that stuff. So that's my only comment about that, unless there's a specific question. Anybody here have any additional questions about anything whatsoever? I'll open the floor up.
Okay, thank
Right.
you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. What?